Ever wish you had like a cheat sheet for relationships? Something to help navigate all those like tricky conversations and stuff.
No, tell me about it.
Well, we don't have a cheat sheet exactly, but
Yeah.
we do have your notes, and they're full of amazing tips for building healthy relationships.
Right.
Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so tip number 1 is be clear about your expectations,
Mm.
which sounds simple enough, right?
Mm.
But I feel we've all been in situations where we just assume the other person knows what we want.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, how many times have we all been like, oh, I hope they throw me a surprise birthday party, but then never actually say anything to anyone?
Exactly. And it's like, yeah,
We just expect them to know.
yes.
But this tip is really about taking ownership of that. Like, it's on us to clearly communicate our needs and desires.
Yeah,
It's not about mind reading.
100%.
It's about setting that foundation of mutual understanding from the get-go.
Yeah, and that actually segues perfectly into tip number 2, which is all about setting realistic goals.
Okay.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in like the fairy tale version of relationships.
Of course.
But no relationship is perfect.
Right, exactly. Expecting perfection is like setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah.
It's so important to embrace the fact that every relationship has its ups and downs, its challenges.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed how like even those movie couples that seem perfect,
Oh my gosh, yes.
they probably go home and argue about who like does the dishes or something?
All the time, right. Like behind the scenes, they're just like us.
Right. They're real people.
It's not a rom-com, it's real life.
Okay, so tip number 3 is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Compromise.
Ooh.
Because even with clear communication,
Mm-hmm.
there will be times when expectations clash.
Of course, like you're two different people.
Right.
You're going to have different wants and needs, and that's totally okay.
So how do we find that balance?
I think that's where compromise becomes so key. It's
Yeah.
really about finding that sweet spot where both people feel heard,
Mhm.
respected, and like they can maybe bend a little without, breaking the whole relationship.
I love that bending, not breaking,
Right.
because it's such a good visual for like
It is.
what we're going for.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have tip number 4, which is all about maintaining that connection over time,
Okay.
checking in regularly.
Such a good one.
I feel like this one's often overlooked.
It's so easy to do, especially like, if you've been with someone for a while, you kind of fall into those routines and you think, everything's fine because it was fine yesterday.
Exactly.
But the thing is, relationships are constantly evolving.
Yes.
And so like checking in regularly just lets you see if you're both still on the same page,
It's like taking the pulse of the relationship.
I love that.
Okay? And then last but not least, tip number 5 is be flexible.
Yes.
Because let's face it, life is unpredictable,
Right happens.
and so are relationships.
Right. And you can't just like have these rigid expectations. And then when things inevitably change,
Right.
you're just stuck and you can't adapt.
Yeah, it's like clinging to
Yeah. You got to be willing to flow.
an old map.
Exactly.
The landscapes has changed.
Yes. And, just like we evolve and grow as people, our relationships need that same flexibility to adapt.
It's so true.
What worked 5 years ago might not work today, and that's fine.
Right.
Just got to be willing to kind of revisit and redefine things as you go.
So as you're listening to this, think about a relationship that you cherish
Yeah.
and ask yourself, are you communicating clearly?
So important.
Are your expectations realistic?
Mm.
And how do you approach compromise? Because remember, healthy relationships are a journey, not a destination.
It's so true. And sometimes that journey means like adjusting our compass, being open to navigating new terrain.
Absolutely.
And never underestimate the power of those open conversations, those check-ins that we talked about.
Yeah.
Because those are what allow relationships to really thrive.
Totally. These notes are a fantastic starting point for having those conversations.
Yeah, they're great.
But I'm curious, what phrases or approaches have you found helpful for actually starting those sometimes tricky dialogues about expectations?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Feels like a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
I know, right? Another time.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Till then.
that's good.